44-year-old Tina Satchwell disappeared one chilly March night in 2017 from Youghal, a tiny coastal town in County Cork, Ireland, home to less than 9,000 souls and famous for its lighthouse and quiet beaches. For years her family and friends held on tight to hope, praying she'd come back, and her husband, Richard, made desperate pleas over and over, "Dina, come home. Nobody's mad at you. My arms are open." Those words hung heavy in the air like a prayer, but as days turned to weeks and weeks to years, hope began to fade, shadows creeping in with every unanswered call. There were barely any clues, no real reason to think Tina had simply walked away to start over somewhere new. Then came a discovery so horrible it shook the entire town to its core and opened a door to a disturbing truth no one was ready for. I'm Kevin, and you're watching Just Thought Lounge. This case has been simmering for years, full of strange twists and dark secrets, and it's only now coming to light. But before we dive deep into the mystery, let me just say thanks to the folks at Vessi, whose waterproof sneakers keep me dry on muddy walks here in England while I chase stories like this one. They're breathable, comfy, and perfect for a guy who's always digging through cold cases and chasing leads. If you want to check them out, vessi.com/thoughtlounge has a 15% discount for new buyers. Now back to Ireland. Youghal is a postcard-perfect seaside town where Richard Satchwell proposed to Tina back in 1989 by the lighthouse overlooking the Atlantic. She was 19, he was 21, and their love story began in England when Tina moved to live with her grandmother near Richard's home in Youghal, Leicester. They met, fell in love, and married. Eventually they settled in Youghal, bought a modest terrace house on Grattan Street, and lived a simple life. Richard drove trucks for a living, and together they made some extra money selling second-hand clothes at local car boot sales. No children but plenty of pets, a parrot named Peach and 2 dogs, Heidi and Ruby. Money was tight, but Tina had a passion: fashion. Richard spared no expense to keep her looking sharp. She was often called a trophy wife, but for 28 years they were each other's world. Until March 2017 changed everything. On the 24th, Richard called the guards. Tina had been missing for 4 days. At first he thought she might have just needed space. After all, their parrot Peach had recently died, devastating Tina like losing a child. She'd been upset, unhappy, and their marriage was strained. But then 2 suitcases were missing, and when Richard checked their hidden money box, the 26,000 euros they'd saved in cash was gone. It didn't add up. Richard told the guards he'd found Tina's keys on the floor when he returned from errands and assumed she'd gone for a walk, but she never came back. No one saw her. No one heard from her. Detectives scoured CCTV footage, desperate to catch her leaving with those suitcases, but she never appeared. Social media buzzed with her photos and pleas, friends and strangers sharing the search, but the trail went cold. Richard's calls grew frantic. "Dina, please come home. Nobody's angry. The dogs miss you. We all miss you." But the community found it strange that Tina would leave without her beloved dogs. Richard said accommodation wouldn't be easy with pets, but friends found it odd. Tina's phone and bank accounts showed no activity, yet Richard insisted she'd taken thousands in cash and left her phone behind. In June, while Richard was away for work, police searched the house. It was filthy, dog mess covering the floors, hundreds of clothes hung in plastic all over the house, some new, some old. Forensics found no blood, but then an odd trail emerged in Richard's emails. He'd been in touch with an international monkey rescue group, wiring money to buy 2 rare monkeys, Terry and Telma. Their bank account was constantly overdrawn. A scam? Probably. Then came July and a strange discovery. Richard saw 2 abandoned suitcases next to recycling bins at a local Tesco, snapped photos and called the guards. The town waited breathlessly. Forensic tests showed the suitcases were empty. A hairbrush inside was sent for DNA testing. No match to Tina. Spring 2018 brought a tip. A strange man was spotted acting suspiciously in Castle Martyr Woods nearby. Authorities launched a massive search with police and military combing 40 acres. Nothing of value was found. Whispers grew louder. Richard was the main suspect. He proclaimed innocence, even volunteered for a lie detector. "I'm innocent," he said. But his story didn't sit right. How did a struggling couple stash 26,000 euros? Why spend money on monkeys they never got? Why renovate their house suspiciously? In 2022 the case got a fresh look. Superintendent Anne-Marie Toomey called in forensic archaeologist Dr. McCullough, an expert in buried remains. His gut said what many feared: when spouses are killed, it's often at home, buried nearby. In October 2023, a search warrant allowed police to excavate beneath the stairs in their house. A cadaver dog led them to a freshly built wall hiding a grave. Wrapped in black plastic was Tina Satchwell. Her face bore shards of broken glass. She wore only a dressing gown. Time had robbed the doctors of answers. No cause of death could be confirmed. Richard was arrested, charged with murder. His story? He claimed he left for errands on March 20th morning, returned, and Tina was gone. Later, he said Tina attacked him with a chisel, and he fought back in self-defense, strangling her with her gown's belt. Panicked, he hid her body in a freezer, then buried her beneath the stairs. But detectives weren't convinced. The glass shards? The careful burial? And why did Richard wire money for monkeys the day she vanished? The prosecution laid it out cold and clear. Calculated murder. Richard had motive, strained marriage, Tina threatening to leave. The defense said self-defense. Only one witness testified. Tina's half-sister, Lorraine, who said Tina had a temper but was never violent. Richard's obsession with Tina, calling her his trophy wife, buying clothes and controlling the marriage painted a dark picture. The jury faced a brutal choice: guilty of murder, manslaughter, or not guilty by self-defense. The verdict? Still unknown. And here's the cliffhanger: what really happened in that house on Grattan Street? Was it passion, accident, or something darker buried beneath decades of secrets? Why did Richard send desperate monkey emails the same day Tina disappeared? Was it distraction or hidden motive? What about those glass shards on her face? The answers are out there, waiting. I'll keep digging because these stories don't stay buried forever. This isn't the end. Not by a long shot. When Tina Satchwell's remains were found buried beneath the stairs of the house she once shared with her husband Richard, the case that had haunted Youghal for years suddenly took on a grim new weight. The discovery confirmed what many had feared but dared not say aloud: Tina was dead. But as the trial unfolded in Dublin's Central Criminal Court in 2025, it became clear that the truth was anything but simple. Richard Satchwell was charged with her murder, but his story kept shifting, his defense painting a picture of desperation, fear, and a fight for survival. The prosecution, however, portrayed him as a man who carefully plotted to end his wife's life, then tried to cover it up. In the courtroom, the tension was palpable. More than 50 witnesses testified over 5 weeks, and the jury, a mix of 7 women and 5 men, listened intently to every detail. Richard's first interview with the Gardaí back in 2017 was straightforward. He left for errands on the morning of March 20th, came home, and Tina was gone. He claimed he found no signs of struggle. But the story didn't hold up. Fast forward to 2021, Richard elaborated. He said Tina was volatile, prone to fits of rage, and had attacked him with a chisel he'd recently used to scrape plasterboard from the walls of their home. He said he fell and she came at him with the tool, forcing him to defend himself. He claimed he strangled her with her dressing gown belt to stop the attack. Then, in panic, he hid her body in a freezer before digging a grave under the stairs and covering it with cement. Detective Sergeant Noonan, who led the investigation, repeatedly pointed out the flaws in Richard's story. For one, the physical logistics didn't add up. Could one person realistically overpower another in that scenario and then carry out the acts Richard described? And what about the shards of glass found on Tina's face? How did they get there if Richard's version was true? There was also no blood evidence anywhere in the house, despite the violent nature of the alleged struggle. The prosecution argued these inconsistencies were deliberate attempts to mislead investigators. They presented a picture of a man overwhelmed by years of frustration in a controlling yet failing marriage. Richard had previously told the Gardaí that Tina threatened to leave him at least 200 times in their 28 years together and that she often called him waste, and said she regretted marrying him. The court heard how Richard had spent lavishly on Tina's clothes and a planned walk-in wardrobe, using credit beyond his means, while their finances were otherwise strained, and how he was wiring money to a fake monkey rescue scheme just days before Tina vanished. The defense, led by Brendan Gryan, challenged the prosecution's narrative fiercely. Gryan painted Richard as a flawed but fundamentally decent man caught in a tragic accident. He suggested Tina's temper and erratic behavior contributed to the tragedy. He emphasized that no direct evidence tied Richard to murder and that no one saw or heard the fatal incident. Gryan asked the jury to consider manslaughter or self-defense rather than outright murder, pointing to the emotional complexities of a long, difficult marriage. Only one family member took the stand for the defense: Tina's half-sister, Lorraine Howard. Lorraine described a relationship marked by tension but denied any violent tendencies from Tina. She acknowledged Tina's fiery temper but insisted she never witnessed violence against Richard. Lorraine said Richard's obsession with Tina was evident. He called her his trophy wife, and lavished her with clothes, money, and gifts in an attempt to keep her close. Yet she described their marriage as controlling and odd, hinting at deeper issues beneath the surface. Throughout the trial, the question lingered: was this a case of a man pushed too far, or a calculated killer hiding behind a facade of grief? The jury was asked to decide between premeditated murder, manslaughter, or not guilty by reason of self-defense. If found guilty of murder, Richard faced a mandatory life sentence. If manslaughter, a lesser sentence awaited. If self-defense was accepted, he would walk free. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the people of Youghal grappled with the tragedy. Tina was remembered as bubbly, sociable, and always impeccably dressed, a woman who loved her dogs and made friends wherever she went. The community mourned the loss of someone they had hoped would return, now forced to accept the brutal reality. Friends spoke of her kindness, her passion for fashion, and the life she had dreamed of building. But questions remained: what really happened behind the closed doors of that modest terrace house? Richard's lawyer argued that the media had already painted him guilty, but the evidence was far from conclusive. Investigators had scoured the house and surrounding areas for years, pursued every lead, yet the motive remained murky. Why had Richard wired money to a monkey rescue scam? Was it a desperate distraction or something more sinister? Adding to the mystery, the shards of glass found on Tina's face never had a clear explanation. Some forensic experts speculated they might have come from a broken picture frame or a window during a struggle, but no broken glass was reported or found in the house that matched. Could this mean there was a different scene, a hidden story no one had uncovered yet? One of the most chilling moments came when the court heard how Richard, after burying Tina, contacted her favorite cousin to offer their used freezer, the very one where he said he had kept her body. This call seemed cold and calculated, hinting at a man trying to cover his tracks or control the narrative. Despite all the evidence and testimony, the jury was left with significant doubt. Some jurors whispered about the lack of direct proof of murder. Others were haunted by the image of a man who might have snapped after decades of frustration and abuse. The court case was a complex weave of love, control, obsession, and tragedy. Then, just as the trial seemed to reach its climax, new evidence emerged, one that threatened to upend everything. The defense submitted documents indicating that Tina had recently begun seeing a psychiatrist, hinting at possible mental health issues. The prosecution questioned whether this was an attempt to explain away violent behavior or instability. More intriguingly, detectives revealed that some CCTV footage from the morning of Tina's disappearance was missing, critical minutes that could have shown what really happened at the house. Was the footage lost due to technical failure or something more deliberate? Who might have tampered with the evidence and why? As the jury began their deliberations, whispers of conspiracy and cover-ups swirled in the air. The case had captivated Ireland, shining a harsh light on domestic relationships hidden behind closed doors. Was justice about to be served, or was the truth slipping through the cracks? The courtroom fell silent as the judge reminded the jury of their duty, to weigh the evidence impartially and reach a verdict based on facts, not emotion. The tension was suffocating. Outside, reporters waited eagerly, ready to capture the decision that would bring closure, or more questions. And yet, even as the jury retired to consider their verdict, one question loomed larger than all the rest. What really happened on the morning of March 20, 2017? Was Richard telling the whole truth? Or was there someone else, someone unseen, a shadow in the background, who played a role in Tina's disappearance and death? As the trial wrapped, rumors began circulating about undisclosed witnesses and undiscovered evidence. Some said Tina had confided in friends about fears for her safety. Others hinted at secret conflicts within the family. The official record was locked away, but the whispers continued. The mystery of Tina Satchwell's final hours remained tantalizingly out of reach. The shards of glass, the missing CCTV footage, the monkey rescue scam, and Richard's ever-changing stories created a puzzle that seemed designed to frustrate and confound. With the jury's verdict still pending and new questions emerging, the case stands on the edge of revelation. Will justice finally be served? Or will more secrets come to light, deepening the shadows around Tina's tragic story? One thing is certain: this is far from over. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation as the jury returned after days of deliberation in the trial of Richard Satchwell, accused of murdering his wife, Tina. 4 years, the people of Youghal and beyond had waited for justice or at least some closure. Now, after over 5 weeks of testimony, hundreds of pieces of evidence, and countless twists, it all came down to their decision. Richard sat quietly, his face unreadable. His defense team had argued self-defense. The prosecution painted him as a man consumed by obsession. pushed to commit a brutal act he tried desperately to hide. The evidence was complicated. There was no direct eyewitness, no murder weapon definitively linked to him, but the circumstantial case was strong. The discovery of Tina's remains beneath the stairs, the inconsistencies in Richard's stories, the missing money, the bizarre monkey rescue scam, all painted a picture of a man who might have gone too far. The jury finally delivered their verdict: guilty of manslaughter. Not murder but manslaughter, a crime of passion or recklessness rather than cold-blooded intent. The judge sentenced Richard Satchwell to a significant prison term, acknowledging the complexity of the case and the murky details that prevented a murder conviction. For the family and community, the verdict was a bittersweet relief. Tina had finally been found and someone was held accountable, but many questions remained unanswered. How had this tragedy unfolded behind closed doors? Was justice fully served? Could there have been more to the story? In the weeks following the verdict, new perspectives emerged. Friends of Tina spoke publicly about her warmth, her laughter, and her love for life, painting a picture far different from the volatile woman Richard had described. They talked about the pressures she faced, the frustration of her marriage, and how she had hoped for something better. Others expressed sorrow for Richard, suggesting his own struggles and possible mental health issues contributed to the tragic outcome. Detectives involved in the case reflected on the challenges of domestic investigations, how appearances can deceive, and how complicated human relationships often are. The missing CCTV footage, the shards of glass, and the odd financial transactions remained mysteries. Some speculated about the possibility of others being involved, though no evidence ever supported this conclusively. The monkey rescue scam became a symbol of desperation and deception, a red herring in the case that complicated the investigation and distracted from the core tragedy. Richard admitted later that the whole arrangement was likely a scam, but it revealed how tangled their lives had become. Ultimately, Tina Satchwell's story became a cautionary tale about the hidden turmoil behind seemingly ordinary lives, the devastating effects of isolation and control, and the search for truth amidst conflicting stories. The community in Youghal held memorials, cherishing memories of a woman who once filled their town with light and energy. Her dogs, Heidi and Ruby, found new homes, a small comfort in a story filled with loss. Richard Satchwell began serving his sentence, maintaining his innocence in public but accepting the jury's decision. Interviews with psychologists suggested he was a man broken by years of unmet expectations and emotional isolation. Some believed his claim of self-defense, others saw him as a man who crossed a line he could never return from. As the dust settled, the case raised important questions about how domestic disputes are handled, how victims are protected, and how the justice system navigates complicated relationships where love, control, and violence intertwine. For me, as someone who's followed this story from the beginning, it's a reminder that truth is often layered, and justice is rarely simple. The bones found beneath that staircase told one story, but the lives behind them told another. A story of dreams, disappointments, and the shadows lurking in everyday life. Tina's death marked the end of one chapter but opened the door to ongoing conversations about domestic abuse, mental health, and the need for vigilance in communities. It's a tragic legacy but one that demands attention and action. This case also highlighted how technology, like CCTV and forensic science, can both help and hinder investigations. Missing footage, unclear evidence, and uncooperative narratives make it harder to piece together the real picture. It's a stark reminder that behind every cold case are real people and complex realities. As we close this chapter on Tina Satchwell, it's important to remember her as more than a victim or a headline. She was a person with hopes, flaws, and a life cut short. Her story urges us to look beyond the surface, to listen carefully, and to support those who might be suffering in silence. Thank you for following this journey with me. Justice in cases like Tina's may not be perfect, but every step toward truth helps shed light on dark corners. If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic issues, please reach out for help. There is support and you are not alone. This has been Just Thought Lounge. I'm Kevin. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the truth.